This is the project that we'll be working on. It's a simple piece using single crochet and single crochet decreases in the round, but you'll be working flat rows back and forth, so it's quite easy. You'll need 2 colors in a light worsteded weight and a 6mm hook, as well as a button and a large eye needle. We'll begin with color 1, and we'll start by creating a slip stitch. And then we'll chain 10, and then we'll work a single crochet into the next chain, and we'll single crochet across all the way to the end. When you get to the last stitch, you'll increase, but you'll do 3 single crochets into that one chain. And then we'll be working into the back side of that exact chain and single crocheting all the way across back to the beginning. And when we get to the starting chain, you'll be working 2 single crochets into that chain to make 3 on both sides. We'll be slip stitching into the first single crochet, but instead of slip stitching with our color 1 yarn, we'll pull through our color 2. You'll want to leave a long tail so you can sew it in later. Then you'll chain 1, and you'll turn your work so you're working backwards. And then you'll start a single crochet decrease, and then instead of working in the next 2, you'll work in the last stitch that you just decreased, and then the next stitch. And then you'll decrease again, doing the same, working in the last one and the next one. And you'll repeat this all the way around to the beginning. And by all means, if you need to slow this down so you can see exactly where I'm working, go right ahead. I know I might work a bit fast for some people. And when we get to the last stitch, you'll bring your main yarn in and put your color 1 on the outside so that when you slip stitch, you can pull it through. And then you will chain 1 and turn your work again, working back towards the way that you just came in the exact same manner. Decrease, and then working in the last stitch and the next stitch, decreasing again. That way you don't create any actual decreases, you're just using it for the texture. and then we'll be working these rows for a total of 9 repeats. So you'll have a grand total of 10 rows before we start and change the pattern again. And here's where we change the color again. We'll slip stitch, but we'll change to color 2 yarn, slip stitch through both, and then chain 1 and turn your work again. We'll finish off these rows and then we'll be back and I'll show you the last little bit of this pattern. Alright, we've finished those 10 rows and we're on our last single crochet decrease of this row before we switch back to color 1. You can cut color 2 now. Make sure to leave a long tail so you can sew it in later. And then we'll do our chain 1 and we'll turn our work again, working on the right side, and we'll single crochet all the way around. We're going to have 3 rows of single crochet. We'll do 2 rows, and then on the 3rd row we'll be creating our button loop. You can also work in a continuous spiral if you want, but make sure to keep track of where your end is, or you can just single crochet around and then slip stitch into your first stitch and then chain 1 and do it again. Personally, I just did the slip stitch so that way it's a lot easier to keep track of, and it doesn't take away from the appearance either. So we're about to finish up row 2 of single crochet. And once we get to the end of this row, we need to lay it out flat so we can find out where the center is. It's about the 6th stitch in. So you'll want to count to the 6th stitch, and then we'll single crochet 6, and then for my button I chained 6. If you're using a smaller button, chain less. If you're using a bigger button, chain more. But I use 6 chains. And then we'll single crochet back into the exact same stitch, and then we'll continue around. Just make sure that your button fits through your hole. If not, then go back and make it larger, smaller, whatever you need. And then once we get to the end here, you'll slip stitch into the first chain, you'll cut a long enough tail, and then you'll pull your yarn through, and that leaves a nice tail, and then just weave in your ends. I typically go into the last row worked and just sew it in that way. I go like 2 or 3 times back and forth just to make sure that it's in there good and won't unravel. You can sew it in a couple rows if you like, but I just go into the first row and then go back on itself so it kind of works into the yarn. Make sure to cut your ends. It's easier to sew the other ones when you turn it inside out and then weave in your ends there. And again, when you're weaving in your ends, just make sure that it doesn't mess up the front of your project. Make sure you weave it in shallow so it's only working on the inside, so it's not visible. And once you're done there, turn it right side out again. Line up your button and your buttonhole, and then sew it into that single crochet section there. I just pass it through once. You can pass it through more if you need to. And then I just double or triple knot it depending on what I use it for, really. But if you have a better knot than just your standard knot, go ahead and use it. And once you're done that, just clip your ends and you're done. You've made your first crochet project. Again, you can use it for any kind of little project like headphones, change, random little bits and pieces, anything. It's a quick little piece and it's fun.